Hi. So, I'm doing a presentation on who are the Tuskegee Airmen. The Tuskegee Airmen were the first black Air Force fighter unit in the U.S. military founded in 1941. The Tuskegee Airmen were trained at the Tuskegee Institute founded by Booker T. Washington because of its well-respected aeronautical engineering program. Tuskegee Airmen started off as an experiment that the U.S. government wanted to fail to prove that blacks did not have the mental capacity to become pilots. All Tuskegee Airmen went to college. In the military, they were not treated as equal. Prisoners of war were treated better than the Tuskegee Airmen. Despite the lack of faith from the government, not only did they become exceptional fighter pilots, they outperformed the white units and won many battles in World War II. This is my grandfather. He was a first lieutenant and first private first class in the U.S. Army in the Korean War. He received the Distinguished Service Cross for extraordinary heroism. And I'm going to talk about a story about how he got it after this. And he was in the 555th Paratroopers Infantry Company, known as the Triple Nickel All-Black Airborne Army Units. So here's a story about him. My grandfather, Dr. Dewey McGowan, displayed great heroism against the enemy in Chorwan, Korea, across the Hantan River on April 19, 1951. On that day, the enemies launched a fierce attack, forcing his unit to withdraw. As Lieutenant McGowan began to withdraw, he saw a seriously wounded comrade nearby. Leaving his radio behind, he successfully carried his wounded comrade across the mountain stream while being shot at to a safe place where medical aid was available. When he recrossed the river to receive his radio, he saw another seriously wounded comrade. Once again, he carried the wounded soldier to safety where he had brought the other soldier. Then, with disregard to his own safety, he crossed the river again to recover his radio when he found an enemy with his equipment. He courageously attacked and killed the enemy and regained his radio and returned safely to friendly arms. So that was the story of my grandfather.
Hi, I'm Colby. I'm going to talk about one of the events they did. On March 29, 1941, Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt visited Tuskegee and met Charles Chief Anderson, the head of the program. Mrs. Roosevelt asked, "Can Negroes really fly airplanes?" He replied, "Certainly we can. As a matter of fact, would you like to take an airplane ride?" Over the objections of her Secret Service, Mrs. Roosevelt accepted. The agents called President Roosevelt, who replied, "Well, if she wants to do it, there's nothing we can do to stop her." With Mrs. Roosevelt in the back seat of his Piper's J-3 Cub, Chief Anderson took her and flew her around for half an hour. Upon landing, Mrs. Roosevelt turned to Chief and said, "I guess Negroes can fly." And they posed together for a historic photo. Not long after Mrs. Roosevelt returned to Washington, it was announced that the first Negro Air Corps pilots would be trained at Tuskegee. This is a picture of, on March 29, 1941, of Eleanor Roosevelt and Charles Chief Anderson. To end on a personal note, my very own grandfather served in the Navy during World War II. He was stationed in San Diego, California in 1940. He was a mess manager, and he managed eating halls, ordered supplies, and cleaned up after officers. I'm very proud of his service to our country.
So I'm here to talk to you about why the Tuskegee Airmen were created. So before the Tuskegee program, there were no black pilots that served the U.S. Air Force. Tuskegee Airmen were created to allow African Americans to serve their country as pilots after the tremendous pressure from the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People and other civil rights leaders. On April 3rd, 1939, Congress passed a bill to set aside money to allow African Americans to train at Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. And they educated hundreds of pilots and navigators. In 1941, Congress passed a bill to create a separate combat unit foundation of the Tuskegee Airmen to test the hypothesis of the time. African Americans do not have as much dexterity and leadership ability to be aviators, especially pilots. The leadership of the military were not supportive of the airmen. The War Department even set higher standards for Tuskegee Airmen so that most applicants were rejected. This ensured that only the most able and intelligent became Tuskegee Airmen. My grandpa, Fleming Leslie Cox, was in the Air Force. He joined the Air Force in 1950 and retired in 1971 after 20 years of serving his country. He worked in the radar supply department and reached the rank of technical sergeant. He served in Korea and Vietnam. When he was in the Air Force, he was disrespected all the time. African Americans were often made to work late and for extra hours, even though they were all serving their country. In many ways, they were not treated equally. My grandpa knew someone who was a part of the Tuskegee program. His name was Mr. James Anderson of Jackson, Mississippi. He died just a couple of years ago in Los Angeles, California. He was a friend of my Uncle Lonnie, so my grandfather knew someone who made history. My father, Dr. Joe Edwards, who's over there, shirt, became a pilot in 2000. Since he was a kid, he always wanted to be a pilot. As a boy, he made flying machines in his backyard that didn't go anywhere. Now he does go places. He has a Cessna 310 P model, twin engine. That means two engines. He has flown around Cuba and throughout the Caribbean, in addition to flying throughout the southwestern United States. He has met a few Tuskegee Airmen through his involvement in his flying club, the Bay Area Black Pilots.
I'm Darius, and I'm going to be telling you where the Tuskegee Airmen flew. The Tuskegee Airmen flew to Italy to set up a squad there that became the 332nd Fighting Group. Their nickname was the Red-Tailed Angels because the bombers they were covering only saw the tails on their planes were painted red, and the angel part was that when the Tuskegee Airmen were covering the bombers, no bombers were shot down, therefore they were angel-like. The 99th Combat Squad was sent to the island of Pantelleria in the Mediterranean Sea to help the Allied forces invade Sicily. The type of planes they flew, at first they were given hand-me-down planes, P-40s and P-39s, but later they were given P-47 Thunderbolts and P-51 Mustangs. My grandfather, James Tryon, was a soldier who fought in the Vietnam War. He also became a pilot 7 years ago, and he flies to this day. Thank you.
action.
Great special effects. And my own aunt worked on the movie with all the actors. You know, it was a really good movie, so you should go see it.
Yay!